Well, here are two heroes of the pro-life movement.
Amen.
They're co-founders of the Pro-Life Action League. Joe is the author of a book of Racketeer for Life and is the chairman of the board of the Thomas More Society. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that as our interview goes on. But I want to welcome the both of you. I was telling when we had Eric on with Joe, Joe looked good, but he looks a lot better when you are sitting next to him.
I'm a lot older.
So beautiful.
Beautiful couple.
It's so beautiful. Well, we want you to tell our family at home a little bit about the Scheidlers. Maybe people know of you, they've seen you as activists being really involved, but let's bring them the at-home version of who you are and how you got to be the place where you are. God is using you so mightily. So, where you met.
It was never our idea.
I know, but that's always
it was God's
right?
plan. Yeah.
Yeah. So where you met, where were you both born and raised?
Well, I was actually born in Hattiesburg, Mississippi.
Wow.
So you're Southern.
I'm Southern, but I was only Southern for 6 weeks because my father was in the Army training at Camp Shelby, was shipped off to the European, battles, and my parents were actually from the Chicago area, so my mom took me and went back up north. So, but then I grew up in a suburb of Chicago.
Okay.
Was your father an attorney? Or did I?
My father was an attorney.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
He was.
But he was a captain in the 442. The Japanese that couldn't fight in the Pacific were fighting in Europe. So he was all through that those battles.
Thank you so much for his service and for your sacrifice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that was, in fact, a big part of our growing up was the fact that he was in this Japanese-American Nisi regiment, and when he was sent to Mississippi for a training, he was an officer, and he got down there, and all of the men were Japanese, and he called back to my mom, who was up in probably Chicago. I think they sent me to the wrong place. He had never met a Japanese person before. But these men became such dear friends of his, and in our home, if one of his Army buddies was coming to visit, it was the greatest honor that could befall a person to have one of the. They were mostly from Hawaii, some from California. But
Well, that's an amazing thought.
it was
because
just-
this is World War II.
yeah, World War II,
And
they
so
still
we're
had
bombed by the
segregated units
Japanese,
in
and
the
this is a
Army.
Japanese
And
group.
these men's families were in those camps, all over the west coast of the United States, and they were going to prove that they were loyal Americans, and they were, and I believe still stands, the most decorated outfit in the history of the U.S. Army
Oh my goodness.
for their heroism.
I hear a book. I hear a book coming on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you meet? When did you meet? How did you get together?
Well, I was teaching in Mundelein College. I'd been teaching at Notre Dame, and I had to take a year off to get for the degrees. When I went back to Notre Dame, the substitute they'd picked for me was doing real well. And I was a little tired of South Bend anyway, because outside the football season, there's not much going on. I'd always go to Chicago to see plays and things, so I just said, I'm going to teach in Chicago. And I was sick of teaching guys. I'd been in the seminary, the monastery, Notre Dame, when it was all men. So I only applied to girls' schools, and it was in Mundelein College where I met Ann. And she knows that story better than I do. I'm not sure what happened.
I actually never had Joe for a teacher. I was a junior at the college when he came there, and I met him. I actually ran into him in the cafeteria. Now, this was a traditional women's college, a little bit prior to the feminist, revolution. So the cafeteria was called the tea room. And there was a table with a bunch of the faculties sitting there, and I was going around recruiting people to come to an event. I was the social chairman. I stopped by that faculty table and said hello to people, and I looked at Joe. I don't know why this occurred to me. I hadn't met him before. I looked at him and thought, I bet I could get him to marry me.
Oh my goodness.
I didn't know that was
Amazing.
a
He never knew that for a long time.
Yeah. That's amazing. Well, our daughter had that experience too. Our son-in-law came to our church. He had moved there from out of state, and he walked in and she told her twin sister, "That's my husband." And she goes, "He hasn't even recognized you. Like, what are you saying?" She goes, "Oh no, that's my husband." And she knew him like in a minute. So that
Yeah.
can happen.
So how long was it between your meeting and your sense about that to the time you were
That
married?
probably about 2 years till we actually did get married.
Okay.
But I had run into him in the student center, which was in the basement of the our school was just a skyscraper. It wasn't like a campus in the inner city, in Chicago school. I ran into him in the student center right before Christmas break, and he said he was going home for Christmas. And I said, "Where's home?" And he said, "Fort Wayne." And I'm going to reveal my geographical ignorance here. I said, "Oh, I didn't know you were from Texas."
Fort Wayne, Fort
He's
Worth.
like, "That would be Indiana."
Yeah. Well, you hit it off really well. You're married now 51 years?
52, right?
51 and a
Yeah.
half.
51
It'll be
and a half
52
years.
in September.
Okay, so you got him to marry you, and
I
it
did.
really worked.
I did.
And you
Yeah.
have
It turned
sex.
out not to be quite as easy as I thought,
Really?
but it
Yeah.
worked out.
Well, I was moving to Indianapolis, and I had all ready to go. I had a job down there, and I came back into my office at Mundelein, and there was a tiny little note on the desk that said, "Don't go." And that changed my life.
And that was your ticket to marriage.
I called Indianapolis, told them to cancel my
How
employment
beautiful.
there, and stayed
Yeah.
at Mundelein, and we got married.
That's perfect. So home is in Chicago.
Home
Right.
is in Chicago.
All the children born there. Okay.
And you've
They
got
were.
24
24 grandchildren.
7 children, 24 grand. And the book, Racketeer for Life, one of the things that's so beautiful about, I mean, you have so many family pictures in there, and the
Yeah,
kids, there's so
too
many
many.
beautiful pictures of
They're
you all.
beautiful.
Well, I hope we got some of them here that people are
The
looking
kids,
at, because your family is just beautiful.
Our kids, of course, grew up in the pro-life movement because I think Eric was about 6 when we got involved. And
Yeah.
they went to the first pro-life demonstration we ever went to. They thought all people went to protests and things on Saturdays.
Oh, right.
When you first began to date or court, was he involved in the movement at that point, or when did you guys
As far
get
as we
involved?
knew, there was no movement.
Oh, there was no
Farthest
movement.
thing
Oh, so
from
we're
our
going
mind.
back. Okay.
Abortion was
Yeah.
a crime. It was a
We got
mortal
married in
sin.
1965.
Right.
Okay, so let's talk about how you all got involved in the movement.
Well, Ann actually got started. They were going to have a rally downtown in Chicago. It was a beautiful Saturday afternoon. I was going to watch Notre Dame beat somebody. And Ann said, "Oh, we all have to get out of this rally." Well, under, the Pledge of Obedience and all that, vow of obedience, we got the 3 boys, and we all went down to the rally. And as we were approaching the rally site where Henry Hyde was speaking, remember Henry Hyde,
Yes.
a great pro-life representative? Anyway, they handed us Life and Death, which was put up by the Wilkies, Jack
Yes.
Wilkie,
Right.
remember his group?
Yeah.
And it had a picture of a black bag full of babies. And they handed us that, and as soon as I saw those babies in a bag, they'd all been killed in abortion. It was a hospital in Toronto because it wasn't legal here in the United States. And one of the little babies looked like Eric's baby picture. And it just became very personal to me. So when we got to the rally site, I listened to every word. I talked to people about it. And then I became almost obsessed that could never happen in America. Although they were trying to pass a law in Illinois, but we thought it would never pass because we'd go down to Springfield and lobby. But then when I was working for a PR firm, when it became legal in January 1973, and I started going to the clinics and talking, doing everything I could, reading everything I could find. And finally my boss said, "Joe, you're totally absorbed in this abortion movement." He said, "Why don't we'll keep you on a payroll, and you'll keep your insurance till your baby's born," because Ann was pregnant with our 4th child. And so I started doing pro-life work full time. And there was no money, there was
Right.
nothing in it when the paychecks ran out. So, but he had told me, with your background in journalism and publicity and so on, you can make a living at this. And so that was kind of the combination of things. But partly it was the little baby in the black bag looked like Eric, and my wife was pregnant with my daughter, Sarah, our first girl. Kathy, I mean, and we didn't even know that it was a little girl. But the thing was, her protection that had been there from the beginning of this nation was gone. She was nothing to our government, and I was in World War II at the end. She means nothing. She can be killed just on a whim. Because if you read Doe v. Bolton, which was not printed much, it was a Roe v. Wade.
So
You
that's a
read Roe v.
companion to Roe v. Wade, Doe v.
Doe v.
Bolton together.
It's in Doe v. Bolton that it gives the parameters, abortion for the full 9 months
Right.
of pregnancy. And most people hadn't read that. It was a
Right.
footnote in Doe. And even the Chicago newspapers, they had 4 at that time. 3 of them left it out, basically. The Daily News put it in, the Doe v. Bolton thing. And I realized that they could kill my daughter. And so it was a personal thing. And I've always hated any kind of abuse of children.
Yeah.
Since I read in the book, I put the Lindbergh kidnapping.
Right.
And that little baby
Right.
was
Yeah.
was taken
That's
out.
right.
And so that I've had that protect the unborn, the helpless, the children. And so it was just a natural thing. That's all I could concentrate on. So we started a pro-life group.
So then what would you do? Then you would go to the abortion clinics, right? I mean, so...
No, we started out going and picketing the abortion clinics and picketing pro-abortion meetings and things. And we actually thought, we really were naive, we misread the general decline of the culture.
Right.
We thought that all you have to do is to show people that it's a human being. So
Right.
we would...
And surely they would stop
Surely
this,
they would
right?
stop this. Americans wouldn't stand for this. So, you know, we would show the pictures of what a baby looks like, because those Nielsen pictures in the womb had already come out in the
Right.
late 60s. And then this is what the baby looks like after an abortion. And we figured, we'll do this for a couple of years and everything will go back to normal. God knew that if he had said to us, would you do this the rest of your life, we'd have said, I don't think so.
Right.
Find somebody else.
Yeah.
But we thought
so he just
people
kind of
didn't
eased
know.
us in, you know.
They just didn't know that it was a human being and how fast it develops and all that.
Yeah.
And we thought that education was the important thing.
Right.
But people didn't know, or they didn't care.
Or they didn't care.
It
They
wasn't their
didn't
problem. My own family.
Right. Or that people did, and still to this day don't believe that you can have an abortion up to all 9 months.
No.
I mean,
Exactly.
people believe, because they want to believe, no, you can't do that, just up to the first 3 months.
Yeah.
And I've said, no, that's not true. I mean, it is this education, you know, all these years later, where people just aren't
They
believing
don't,
it.
you know, and that's one of the advantages of the public debates about things like the partial birth abortion or restrictions after 20 weeks. At least the information gets out through the news and online and everything that these things are happening and somebody's trying to make it
Right.
stop
And
it.
you can have that conversation.
Right. Yeah.
So you did picketing, you went to all the meetings, you thought, okay, we're just going to shut them down. You went to Clinton, wherever they were, you protested them, you figured this is going to stop. And
But
then,
you know, one day we were protesting at an abortion clinic in downtown Chicago, and we had a picket line of about 25 people or so, probably. I had one of my little girls
Yeah.
holding my hand, and a woman walked through the picket line into the abortion clinic. It was the first time I ever actually saw somebody go to an abortion clinic, and it just hit me. You know, she's walking in there, probably pregnant. She's going to come out with
one
no
less
baby.
person's coming out.
Yeah. And that was when I think we realized we have to do better than just protest it. We have to offer them something. Now, pregnancy centers did exist, but they exist on a shoestring, and the women going in there, of course, wouldn't know
Right.
that there were these alternatives, that somebody was there to help them. So we started developing ways that you could approach them and let them know, you don't have to, this isn't your only choice. You don't have to do this. And give them the phone number, tell them where they can go, you know, to get some.
And we worked
Real
very
help.
closely with the crisis pregnancy
Yeah.
centers, helped get some of them
Yeah.
started. you know.
Well, let's speak about some of what's in the book. This is some of what's in the book, obviously. Racketeer for Life, Fighting the Culture of Death from the Sidewalk to the Supreme Court. And, you know, at the beginning of your book, your own note, I love what you said. 'Cause you're speaking about since 1973, 72. And you say, I remember the early years that prepared me for the raging battle to save the lives of the unborn. And of course, it's an abridged history. But you know, this is the way I remember those events. This is the way I remember the people at that time that were involved in the battle, the other side of the battle. This is the way I remember the evil. So you
That
felt
led to it. Right.
yeah. So I mean,
What was happening.
this is your memoir of 44 years, 45 years or so. Why was it so important for you to put this down? I mean, it must have been so overwhelming to. We're still in the battle, but you're going through all these years of reams of paper and clippings and so on and memories. And why did you do it?
Well, it's twice as big, actually. This has been cut in two. I mean, that was a lot. One thing was, a lot of people, I would give a lot of talks all over the country, and people would say, you ought to write a book. And it always came out, you ought to write a book. I thought, you know, I'm doing my job. I'm running around telling people, but that was frequent. And then I did have a hotline I put on every day. It was a message of what was happening.
Right.
People would call
Right.
it. It was a free line. I'd gotten the idea from the Nazis because you can't get rid of it. They're not calling you, you call them. So I started the Pro-Life Action Hotline. And I had all those boxes and boxes of all that information day by day. I had my diary. I had all these experiences. And so I just started, I had that material. And then there were two young women that volunteered, said they wanted to work on Saturdays. And they were both great typists.
Yeah.
So I would just bring them in Saturday morning and start talking. And they could keep up with, they were fast typing. And I would tell these stories. And the chapters piled up, and pretty soon I had an enormous manuscript. So I got my son Peter, who's a teacher, and we started going through and checking everything out. He would check the magazines, the dates, the places, the quotes, all these things. I had, for instance, when I was before the congressional hearings on clinic violence, Charlie Schumer and Pat Schroeder and so on, we got all those records. So we put it together, we had a book, and then we had to start cutting it down, and we got it down to where it was printable, and I wanted it smaller. Then my attorneys wanted to look at it, and that took forever for them to
Right,
decide. You
right.
can be liable here. And then.
Sure, but that's safe.
Yes, yes, you want to
Let's
be
just
safe.
pause at this point. The book is Racketeer for Life, Fighting the Culture of Death from the Sidewalk to the Supreme Court. Joseph M. Scheidler, right there at the very beginning, has trained thousands of activists throughout the country and throughout the world. Plenty more to come. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Well, we're having a beautiful conversation with Joseph and Ann Scheidler. They are co-founders of the Pro-Life Action League, talking about their years, a long time, of pouring their life, showing up at clinics, protesting before the courts of this land, with their family in tow, and just making a great sacrifice to advance the culture of life.
And they're on fire right now for the Lord. It never ebbs. Joe, as I was reading the book, you know, the first chapter is called Sorry I Missed You. And I thought to myself before I read it, I said, well, that's pretty benign. I mean, it's pretty... But when I read Sorry I Missed You, how does that fit into the book? Because it's profound.
Well, I left a card at an abortion clinic.
Okay.
They weren't open, and I wanted to talk to the abortionists, try to talk them into sense. And I left the card, and I wrote on the back, sorry I missed you. They weren't there. Well, that showed up in my trial, my racketeering trial, years later, and it meant, sorry I missed you.
Lord have mercy.
So they took that
I was
as
here to kill
a
you.
threat.
They call it
Yeah.
a threat.
A threat,
Sorry I
a death
missed you.
threat. And all the way through, we had a sign out in front of where we had a pro-life meeting, what we called a Pro-Life Action Network meeting in Wisconsin, and they had the sign, the guy was writing, pro-life activists have a ball. He couldn't find an extra L to put on this big, so he had an S, so he said pro-life action have a blast.
Oh,
Well,
God.
blast can only mean you're going to plan
Right.
bombings. And this is the kind of evidence that was used all during our 20-some, our
my
trial.
Okay.
We started in 1986 with a charge of violating the Sherman-Clayton antitrust. That didn't go anywhere, so they changed it to racketeering. Racketeering operation.
RICO, Racketeering
RICO.
Influence Corrupt
Which is
Organization.
big gangs, you know, make money, and the damages are tripled, so obviously there's some money involved. Well, there wasn't any money involved. We weren't making a cent, but they were losing money. And so we went to the Supreme Court first time
Right.
to see, can they use racketeering? And the court ruled they could. So we went to trial eventually. This dragged out for 20
Oh, yeah.
So the first time the Supreme Court just ruled, yes,
Yes.
it can be used. They didn't make a decision about it, so you went to
No.
trial. Okay.
Yeah.
We went to
Go
trial.
ahead.
We had an 8-week trial, and we were
But,
found
you know,
guilty.
legal things take forever, so
forever.
years and years
Yeah,
drag
right.
on
And that's
as
where
you
all
do.
this stuff about have a blast, sorry I missed you, they brought in Miss Hollywood. They lied through their teeth. Names couldn't be used. It was a farce. It
So
was
you-
just a farce.
But you were found guilty.
Guilty.
Were you found guilty, or the organization found guilty, or what? How did that work?
Both.
Both.
Yeah.
Both. Us
Okay.
and the organization.
So what happens from that point?
Then you repeal. You start
Okay.
appeal, and you lose. So we got to the Supreme Court again, and they ruled 8-1. We were not guilty. It came down. It was rejected. They said that we had missed. The court had not looked at all the predicate acts. That 3 had been over there are 100 and some predicate acts. They didn't say what they were, but we were now still guilty.
That's incredible. You won at
So-
the Supreme Court level.
Yeah.
They take it back down.
And it was rejected.
and
I never had heard of that.
No.
I
now
didn't think it
insisted the
could happen.
Supreme Court missed something. They missed
Yeah.
these.
It was their
these things.
fault.
Okay, so then it goes.
It goes all
We're doing
through-
this fast, but it takes years.
We go all
Yeah.
through it again. We get back to the Supreme Court. They eventually rule unanimously that we're not guilty, and they want it to stick. It was only 8-0 because there had been a death, and Senator O'Connor.
And she had
she
retired,
had
and
retired.
Alito hadn't been
Right.
I-
on the
hadn't
court
been
yet
on.
when ours was
So-
heard, so he couldn't vote.
So it was
So-
8-0. But it came back down, and then we wait because they lost, and so they owe us damages. And finally, 2 years ago, coming up, they paid some damage. They paid it off.
Pay their costs. Yeah.
Our costs, which wasn't much.
Well, we got an email, and it says, your court case took a very long time to eventually be resolved. This must have taken a great toll on you and your family. How is your faith able to sustain you through such an ordeal? And this is Jane from Gardner, Kansas.
Ah.
And
Well, you know, it's funny to say, but it didn't feel like a big burden, this whole ordeal. We went right on doing all of our regular pro-life work anyway, and you know, all our kids are going through school, and they're
Right, you're doing
you know,
life.
Yeah, we're doing life, and we're continuing to protest and to train sidewalk counselors. We got an awful lot of publicity because of the RICO
Right.
lawsuit, which higher profile. It actually brought in some more funding, which enabled us to do our sidewalk counseling video, No Greater Joy.
Yes.
We've been wanting to do that for years, and we didn't have the funds.
Right.
And all of a sudden, you know, we've got this notoriety, and now we can afford, which is the opposite of what now
Right.
intended. in
Right,
this.
right.
They intended
Yeah.
to put us out of business, and instead, they gave us opportunities. Plus, I think really that you could feel the support from all the prayers. You know, we were constantly getting calls and letters from people saying, you're in our prayers, our family is praying for you, we're saying our rosary for you. People made sacrifices. When we were in the trial, many people came to that courtroom, sat in the back row and
it was
prayed
packed.
the whole
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
Back. And
yeah.
we built a little shrine. We had a bunch of law books in front of the desk where the 3 of us sat, Andy Schulberg and Tim Murphy and myself, and we put a little shrine of the Blessed Mother and put our rosaries there, and everything was nice. We had family members come up until I found out the kids were too good looking.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
you got
Yeah.
the
Get
judge
them off the
about that.
front
Get them
row.
off
They
the
look
front.
too good.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, it's
Yeah.
really true because, you know, it really is what the devil meant for evil, right?
Exactly.
God turns
Yes.
it around to make a greater good out of it. You have to go through that trial. It didn't feel good, that it was expensive. It's hovering over you as you go through it. But God just turns that whole
Yeah.
thing around, and that's
Yeah.
where the devil overplays his hand.
Right, all the time.
Right.
And
Yes.
one thing, a law firm came out of this. Tom Breck, I was
Right.
working for Abraham and Fox in Chicago, and he was given a kind of a threat. You
was
stay
an
with them.
ultimatum.
It was an
Right,
ultimatum, that's the
right.
word I was looking for. and he chose us. So he goes off of their payroll and all of it.
And of course, that is another wonderful outgrowth of the
Right.
whole thing, because
He's got 100 and some clients
What's the name
right
of the
now.
society?
Thomas More Society.
And she's the chairman of the board.
You're the chairman of the board. Wow.
When he had to leave, when Tom had to leave his firm, he needed a way. The Pro-Life Action League wasn't going to be able to pay him, and he, of course, needed to eat.
Take care of his family.
Right.
His wife wasn't too happy about that, though.
Right.
Right?
His wife had
Right.
just retired
Sure.
from being a teacher. She'd been teaching Spanish for many, many years. She had just retired. And so she unretired, God love her. She went back to work. And we started the Thomas More Society as a separate nonprofit organization, so they could independently raise funds.
great
and,
work.
Yeah.
and they have gone on to represent pro-lifers all over.
Yeah.
David Delyden and
Yes.
Lila Rose. And,
How
yeah.
beautiful.
When they get into trouble, they go to Thomas More.
Yeah.
Beautiful. The early days, when you started this whole area of pro-life activism, you wrote another book besides this one. Is it closed?
I wrote close because I was getting a lot of questions from people all over the country on what do you do? What do you do? And so I would write them letters, sidewalk counseling and show the pictures and so on. And so finally I thought, why don't I just write a book about this? So I was going to have 100 ways to stop abortion.
Yeah.
I couldn't think of the 100.
Because it's 99 ways. I can still see it. 99
My 99 chapter says, write your own, think up your own idea. And I started getting letters with fantastic ideas. I had 40-some more suggestions. I could write a book now with 151 ways.
You write it, we'll have you back on. So we have another email.
It says, you've been involved in the pro-life cause for over 40 years. Given today's culture, do you see hope that abortion on demand will ever be eradicated? And this is Sharon from Hastings, Nebraska.
The answer is yes.
Yes.
It's being eradicated.
Yes.
There'll always be abortion, but there's great hope, and there was euphoria in Washington at the march, because weird as Trump may be, he's picking wonderful people. His Governor Mike Pence of Indiana was a great idea. That was the first. And Kellyanne,
Right.
Conway, she's an old friend of ours
Yes.
who used to come to our pro-life meetings all the time, and she's 100%
Yeah, she's
pro-life.
wonderful.
Yes.
And the guy that he's picked out for the Supreme Court is another Scalia. So things are looking, there are weird things happening, but they're also he's getting so many good people around him that know what the problem is. So I do believe that in this administration we'll get enough justice to overturn Roe v. Wade. That doesn't end abortion, but it says something
The
about
culture
America.
is also
Right.
shifting, too.
Right.
The culture is getting much more liberal in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
but it's recognizing the humanity of the child. And increasingly, polls show more people identify as pro-life, more people would like to see some restrictions, even if they aren't ready yet to eradicate it completely. They are really uncomfortable
Yeah,
with
and
late-term
it really goes
abortion.
back to your original conversion, where you got when it was an intimate encounter with the unborn. I mean, that you had and seen your own child in this one, and you thought, well, if people see this, then it'll all change, but it really hasn't gone that way. But yet, it is influential, especially with the younger people who are the survivors after 44
Well,
years.
you know what?
Right.
They know, I'm a survivor. I
Right.
wasn't
Yeah.
regarded as a human person in the womb. There's something, and young people like justice kind of things. This is not fair. This is not fair.
Yeah.
And they kind of get that, and then they are seeing, they are looking at field development, they are looking at the abortions. They're intrigued by it. They want to see what's going on.
And they have an ultrasound of themselves in their
Right.
baby book.
Right. That's
And
right.
They were a
they don't
human
have to be
being. They
religious
know they
either.
were a human
They're just
being.
saying, that's wrong.
That's
Right.
right.
That's wrong.
And they're seeing it, and it doesn't take a long time. You can take somebody, when we go out on the college campuses and so on, you'll have kids, they're pro-abortion, women's rights, all this stuff. A little conversation with them, and they begin to see it.
Right.
They begin very quickly, they catch the idea. These are my fellow human beings. I'm a survivor, 1 out of 3. Or
Yeah.
1 out of-
Right.
It's so beautiful that you've written this memoir, and there's plenty more to live. Because Joy and I were involved in what was called the rescue movement. That was a
Right.
part
Right.
of
Right.
this whole thing, and it's so important. It's amazing as you go on in the years, people don't. And she's living, Joan Andrews. They're not familiar with the name.
They're not familiar,
Not
yeah.
familiar with the name, or Chet Gallagher, or John Kavanaugh O'Keefe. But you know, you chronicle all these characters, wonderful, wonderful
Yeah.
characters.
They're all an important part of the
Yes.
history.
Why are they important? Why is it important to know them and what they were doing at that time, the courage they displayed? Why?
Well, they're part of our history. You know, this is a country that everybody holds up. You know, it's great. Everybody flocks here and so on. And because we protect and we give people freedom and all this, we're person oriented. And so these people saw that and they felt it. Randy Terry, I remember when he was afraid to go near the clinic, and he invited me out to Binghamton, New York, and I said, forward march, and we went down right in front of the clinic, and the cops came, and it was public sidewalk. And the use of the pictures. We can stand out on the highway with these great big ugly pictures, and you say, why should those? That turns people off. That's how we got in the movement, through the pictures. I was at a table one time at the Monasteros in Chicago, and all of us pro-life leaders just had a meeting. And I said, how did you get in the movement? Well, I happened to see a picture.
Right.
I said, Lila Rose
Right.
opened up the handbook on abortion by Dr. Wilkie, saw the pictures. She's totally committed for life. It's what you see. Seeing is believing.
Right.
And abortion is ugly.
Yeah.
It's ugly. It's killing a child. You can't be much worse than that.
Right. We would always say, you know, we've been in the church and working in the church and confronting evils in the church. We never knew how evil was until we stepped out on the sidewalks. And you saw, and it was evil. It was demonic. It was like, wow, because you were coming against the gates of hell.
Right.
Yes.
You know, and innocently
It's
just showing
like
up,
child
trying to love.
sacrifice.
Right. And that's what it is. And you're just saying, that girl's going to go in there and her life is never going to be the same.
No, look what it's done to women.
Right.
You know, and to
to
men,
men.
and to the grandparents and siblings
What
of
do you
these
think
children.
it's done to women?
Well, abortion is such an unnatural thing for a woman to do. You only do this out of desperation when you feel you have no choice. And you hear that on the sidewalk. I'm sure you've heard that. The whole business of, oh, women need this choice, pro-choice, pro-choice. But women who make that choice feel there isn't any other
Right.
choice. And then they live with that. Everybody else who said, go do that, goes on about their way, you know, doing whatever they were going to do anyway. And she's left with, I made this choice.
Right.
My child is gone, a child you can't get back.
And in
And-
some ways, it's worse for the father. There's a book out called Fathers and Abortion by Shostak. And he's trying to show that men really think abortion's okay, but they don't. The men are worse off in some ways than the woman.
Right.
The woman at least went through some pain and an operation, all that sort of thing. The guy is helpless. He's the father, and many of these men want that baby.
And in this culture, in this society, you know, if you try to say something, it's like you have nothing to say.
Yeah, so
we
they're
just
cut
have
out of the process.
we have a minute left, Joe. Just your hope for the book, your hope for our culture.
Well, I hope for the book for people that need to do what's in the book. Everybody should go out to a clinic if they can possibly get their wheel in there or whatever, but go where it happens. We are in an atrocity, a Holocaust in our country, which has got to stop. It's offending God. So I think everybody has to do something. And the reason for the book is that you'll do something. You'll say, hey, I can do that, and they'll do it.
Joe and Ann Scheidler, thank you so much for your years of faithful service in pro-life. You're really prophetic, and prophets embody the message they speak. You embody life, marriage, and the family. We bless your lives. The best is yet to come.
Thank you.
It's Racketeer for Life, fighting the culture of death, from the sidewalk to the Supreme Court. If you get it, it's a must-read. Go to prolifeaction.org if you want to be equipped to do the pro-life work right where you are. We'll be right back. Please don't go away.